Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for having me out and inviting me here this morning. As you can see, I've traveled quite a distance to be here through time itself. My name is, I've come here to tell you a story this morning. It's really 4 stories that changed my life, and so I thought they might change yours as well. But before I get into those, a little bit about myself. My name is Marcus, and I'm a pig farmer. I should say I was. Something happened, which we'll get to later, that now, as you can see, I'm a shepherd rather than a pig farmer. I was born and raised on the eastern side of what you know as Galilee, or what my people call Tiberias, and so I'm a Gentile. I'm a dirty, unclean Gentile pig farmer, according to those other folks across the lake. And so I took after farming pigs like my father. I have several brothers, and many of them took to the sea, following in the steps of my uncle. So the story I'd like to tell you, it starts out really on a day like any other. For a number of weeks, I'd been seeing across Tiberias, across the sea, these large crowds gathering. And I would see them, they would move up and down the shorelines. And every once in a while, the wind would be just right, and you get a sound coming across. And from what I could tell from my distance, they appeared to be following this person wherever he went. And I mean, these were large crowds. I've lived there my whole life. I've never seen crowds this large and this often. And so something was going on, but what do I care? Those are the Jews. Let them do their thing, and they certainly don't want anything to do with me, a pig farming Gentile. And so on this particular night, it was another crowd had formed, and it was almost directly across the sea from us. And I saw the crowd form. It looked like there was a figure out in a boat. I assume this was the teacher teaching the crowd. Night was setting, and so I saw the crowd disperse, going home to eat some food or whatnot. And I saw a number of boats coming our way across the sea, which wasn't unusual. There were fishermen fish at night on the sea, and so that wasn't anything unusual per se. And so there was one boat that seemed to be in front with a number of boats trailing on either side. And it was nothing unusual, and so I went to bed. And about midway through the night, this beastly storm arose, and Tiberias, she just started raging. You see, Tiberias, she's in this bowl of mountains, and the wind will come screaming down like an eagle after a fish. And she'll charge into the deep waters of Tiberias, and then the wind and the waves will start crashing. And it's not uncommon to see waves, in your measurements, 8 to 10 foot high. And so they'll come in, they'll crash over the boats, and if you're not careful, your boat can sink fairly easily. In fact, my second youngest brother, who took to the sea with my uncle, he perished in just such a storm last year. And so he was caught out at night, the storm arose, and his boat sunk. We never saw him again. And so on such a night, this storm arose, and so I awoke, and I knew the boats were out there, and by this time, they were close enough that I could see the silhouettes, and I could make out the screams and the shouts, and there's all of these men just screaming and shouting. And I could tell by their rigs that some of these men are fishermen, and so this wasn't anything new to them, and they were terrified, and so they're screaming and shouting and doing anything they can to try and ride out, to try and survive this storm. And then in the boat closest to me, it looked, and for whatever reason, there was so much commotion, but I happened to focus on this boat, and it was dark, so I didn't get the best view, but it looked like there was a man who bent down and shook something, and so I assumed he must be grabbing, they're throwing the cargo overboard to lighten the load or something. But as he bent down, he bent below the hole, and then two men came up. And so apparently this other man was sleeping or passed out or something, or just terrified. But the one man went down, and two men came up, and then I saw that something which I have never seen before, nor since. Something which my brain is trying to process. You see, this man that came up, he stood up, which is no easy feat in these ways. And so he stood up, and he stuck out his hand, and I heard it clear as day. I mean, the wind must have been just right. I heard it clear as day. He said, "Peace, be still." And Tiberius listened. And the wind stopped, and the waves, they stopped raging, and the storm was just gone, instantly gone. The wind and the waves, they stopped, and I thought, who is that? Who is that Tiberius will listen to him? Who is that control the wind and the waves? And so needless to say, the rest of the night, I did not get any sleep. I was just pacing back and forth thinking, who could this be? I've never seen this before. Eventually, the sun rose and morning came, and the boats, they came over to my side of the sea, and they landed. And the area where they landed is a place, my village, we don't go too often. We bury our dead there, and we don't bury our dead like you do. Where you dig a hole, we put ours in caves, and then we seal the entrance of the caves. And in this burial area, you see, there was this crazed man. I mean, crazy, out of his mind. I swear he's possessed by Beelzebub. And in my village, many times we'd try to wrestle him to the ground and try and restrain him. And on times we'd even get chains and shackles on him, and he would just break them every time. And we don't make weak chains, right? And he would just break the chains and tear off the shackles, and no one could control this man. He was crazed, a lunatic, out of his mind, possessed by Beelzebub himself. And so the boats, which the night before were caught in the storm, they landed in this area, and I was kind of wondering, there's a part of me that's terrified. I don't really want to meet this man who can calm the storm, but I felt, should I warn them that this crazed man is in the area and to get out of there, or what? And before I even had a time to react, again, I didn't understand what I was seeing. I heard this shout from the tombstones. It said, "Have you come to punish us, Son of the Most High God?" And then I saw this crazed man. He just sprints right toward this leader coming out of the boats. He just sprints right toward him. I think he's going to attack him. But instead, he sprints, and he falls on his knees, and then he starts begging. And I thought, I have never seen this before. What? This man, no chain can hold him, no man can hold him. And yet, he sees this other from a distance, and then he falls down and begins begging. And I hear this conversation take place, and this other figure who'd gotten out of the boats, he said, "What is your name?" And the crazed man, he responded, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And I thought, Legion? That's 6,000 soldiers, Legion. Oh my goodness, how is that possible? And yet, this Legion, it's a Legion, for we are many. And the man who'd gotten out of the boat, he said something which I can't quite place, but I remember the response from the crazed man. He begins begging and pleading, "Please don't send us out of the area, please. Send us into those pigs over there." Whoa, these are my pigs, hey. Whoa. And yet the man from the boat, he permits that. And two things happen in that moment. The first is that the crazed man, instantly I saw this change come over him. Instantly, he was a different person. I could just tell, whereas before he was fitful and raging, and he would take these stones and rocks and he would cut and bruise himself, and now he was sitting there rather placid at the feet of this man from the boat. And some of his disciples, they must have put a robe on him because he was sitting there clothed rather calmly and in his right mind. And you see, that was one thing that happened. But over here, my village, they weren't all mine. We sort of put our herds together. We had about 2,000 pigs. And out of nowhere, these pigs, they just rush headlong, and they launch over a cliff straight into the sea. And so I was, in my head, I'm thinking, what's going on? And my brothers that were with me tending to the pigs. And so we took off and we ran up to the village and we told everyone. And so the whole village comes back and they see the same things I saw. They see this crazed man who's now clothed and in his right mind. And they also see their pigs, which are floating out into Tiberias. And so they were terrified. We were all terrified. And so they just begin begging, please leave. We don't know who you are. We don't know what you've done, but all we know is you got here, and somehow you've got something to power over these demons, and our pigs are dead, and so please, just go, just leave. And so the people from the boats, they leave, and in my head, I'm sort of torn. On the one hand, my pigs are gone, and I'm terrified. And who can control Beelzebub? And so I'm terrified. But I want to know, who is this man? Who is this man that can calm the sea? That can control the demons? Who is this? And so my livelihood was gone. I really had nothing to lose, and so As the boats were leaving, I caught one of the last ones, and I asked if they would give me passage across. And thankfully, they did. They were gracious, even to a Gentile like me. Apparently, this man was having some effect on them. And so we crossed over to the sea, and then when we landed, a large crowd gathered together. And as the crowd gathered, out of the midst, the man who calmed the sea, who tamed the demons, I started asking around his disciples and trying to figure out, who is this? Trying to figure anything out. And they say, he is our Messiah. He is our King, and he has come to bring in his new kingdom. And I thought, what sort of kingdom is this? I'm not really sure. And so this crowd was gathering around this king. He did not look like any king I know. Kings tend to stay in their palaces and issue orders, and this king was out among his people. And so I was a bit skeptical what sort of king this was. But back to the story. So the crowd had gathered, and out of nowhere, this who I later figured out he was a leader of a synagogue, similar to you have a red-headed person who does something here, similar to that. And so he came up, and he falls on his knees in front of this king, who I later learned his name was Yeshua, or Jesus, or Jesus. And he begins begging. He says, "Please, my daughter, she's going to die. Please, I beg you, please help her. Come, save her." And so this Jesus, he agrees. And as they're moving over to the synagogue leader's house, all of a sudden, in the midst of the crowd, this king, this Jesus, he just stops. He stands ramrod straight, and then he starts looking around. And then I hear him ask this silly question. He says, "Who touched me?" And his disciples thinking, "What is wrong with you? What happened at sea? Everyone is touching you. You're surrounded by a crowd. How can you ask who touched you?" But undeterred, he looked around, and then I saw what made him stop and why this was so urgent. You see, there was this woman there on the ground, and she had fallen to her knees, and she just reached out and touched the hem of his cloak. And so I knew then what he was going to do, he's going to put her in his place. If he is some king, how dare this lowly woman come up and think that she might have access to him? And so turning around, expecting him to put her in his place, instead he stoops down and he takes her by the hand and he says, "Woman, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Again, I thought, who is this? And later I learned that this woman, she'd been bleeding for 12 years, which also happened to be the same age as that synagogue leader's daughter. And so for 12 years she'd been bleeding and her blood flow had stopped. And then the crowd continued, and they continued to the synagogue official's house. And when they get there, they see this great commotion. I forgot to mention, so along the way to the synagogue leader's house, some messengers, they came up and they said, "Sir, your daughter is dead. And so don't bother the teacher anymore. She's dead. There's nothing she or he can do. She's gone." But Jesus, again, undeterred, he carries on, and they reach the house, and there's big commotion. There's all these mourners who are outside weeping and wailing. And I could see that this king, this Jesus, he was upset by this. He said, "Why are you wailing? Why are you weeping? She's not dead. She's just asleep." And so the mourners they were a bit put off, and they scolded him. They rebuked him. They said, What are you talking about? She's dead. We know she's dead. We saw her. She's upstairs, and she's dead. And don't give us false hope. She's dead." But undeterred, and so this Jesus, he says, "All right, everyone out. Get out of the house." And he brings 3 of his followers and the parents, and then they go into the house and upstairs, where the little girl is quite clearly dead on the bed. And he walks over and he takes the little girl by the hand, and he says, in his language, he says, "Talitha kum," or "Little girl, get up, wake up." And she does. She gets up. She was dead, and now she's alive. And so who is this? Who is this man? All right, who can bring the dead back to life? And I'm told it didn't work, but I'm told he tried to tell the parents not to say anything, right? To keep this quiet. But clearly, we know there's a little girl who's dead in the house, and a few days later she's going to come out and walk around. So I don't know what he was getting at there, but it was strange because whereas he's telling these Jews to be quiet, my people, the crazed man, he says, "Go and tell your village, tell your family what the Lord has done for you." I'm not sure what to make of that, but as I followed this man and I saw what he had done to the sea, and then I saw what he had done to the crazed man and to the woman and to the little girl. You see, he was on the boat, and everyone on the boat, their lives were gone, right? They were going to die. Very few people can survive those storms, and yet he gave them life back. He saved them from death. And this crazed man, he had no life whatsoever, right? I mean, he's crazy. He's cutting himself. He's bruising himself. He had no place with us. Not even clothing on his back, and yet this king gave him life back. And this woman who'd been bleeding, I mean, her very, the life is in the blood. Her very life blood is draining out of her for 12 years, and then he stops it, and he gives her life back. And then this little girl who has fully lost everything, right? Her life gone, and he gives her life itself back. And I thought, who is this? Who is this man? that can calm the storms, that can tame the demons, that can stop the blood, that can bring the dead back to life. What sort of king is this? Could I be in his kingdom? Could I join that? Do I, this unclean Gentile, do I get to be in? Well, later I would learn the answer, but that's as far as I'll get today, and I just want to leave you with this question. Who is this? Who is this that can calm the sea, that can tame the demons, that can stop the blood, that can bring the dead back to life? What sort of king is this? Who is this?